What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show. Me, Sean Sheehan, here on Sherdog.com. And today we're looking ahead to the PFL Super Fights Battle of the Giants. Brace for impact from the PFL, October 19, 2024, over in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And this, honestly, I usually sit down here and talk for half an hour about these cards. I feel like this could be a 3-hour one talking about this, because there's so much intrigue in the event, in how it has come together, in what it will mean for the MMA landscape, and in obviously the fights themselves as well. Now, this show is mostly the fights themselves, and that's what kind of what I stick to every week, and I will do that. But I think it'd be remiss of me not to start with the importance of this. It's a pay-per-view card, obviously, for the PFL, and you know what this is? I was thinking about it. What's the difference between this card and other cards that we've seen in mixed martial arts down through the years, right? So, like, if we looked at this card and it had Francis Ngannou against, Renan and Ferreira, but in place of Renan and Ferreira, you can put the next heavyweight contender, right? Let's say we look at Francis as a champion or one of the best in the world. You have Cris Cyborg against, similar, the next person in line, Larissa Pacheco, who just had a massive win over another great fighter. And then you've a middleweight title fight. And then you have one of the best up-and-comers in the world against one of the next best up-and-comers in the world in McKee and Hughes. And then others like the likes of Rafi and Stats and other people as well. If you looked at that card, right, and it had UFC on top of it, you think, yeah, that's a pretty good pay-per-view card, right? That is a pretty good pay-per-view card. And my point is, we have seen cards down through the years, and I could go back and I could make a list of them. There haven't been that many, but and we'll say in recent years, we forget about, like, we could go back to Pride and other things and discuss that. But we've seen, especially Bellator cards, that are kind of like that, right? They had a good main event, maybe a good co-main event, maybe a title fight in there, and maybe an AJ McKee fight or a Patricio fight or whatever it might be on the undercard. And you think, oh, this is a very, very, very good card. UFC-like card. The difference with this one to all of them is Francis Ngannou, right? There have been great fighters and great cards and great matchups in the last, how many years would you put into 5 to 10 years? But have we ever seen one of those great cards with, like, a great drawn? No, I think Cris Cyborg has drawn well throughout her career, but Cris Cyborg was kind of, she was only in the UFC for a small bit of her career almost. I think she's kind of a draw herself and a unique person in that and should get credit. But you can throw her into this as well. But with Francis Ngannou atop this card, it gives it a different look than most other really great cards that I know Bellator did one pay-per-view, I think, and they didn't do another one. So, why didn't they do another one, And they've had a lot of big cards, and PFL have had big cards and won championship and others, but what Francis Ngannou has done over the last few years in terms of what he did in the UFC, becoming a champion and becoming a guy who, at one time when they're talking about the John Jones-Ngannou fight, it was like, this is the biggest fight that can be made in MMA. And at the time, maybe sans McGregor, that was a possibility. And then he went obviously over and he did the deal with the PFL that would allow him to box. And a big part of that as well, which we forget, he did a deal with the UFC, which would have made him, would have been the biggest paid, and maybe again, Sans McGregor, the biggest paid UFC fighter of all time. So he did that, turned that down, went to PFL. I don't know if he got as much from PFL, but got his opponents paid, but didn't got the opportunity to box. Had that massive boxing match where, it's, if you look it up on his record, he didn't beat Tyson Fury, but we all know he did. And then obviously he had the second one with Anthony Joshua. That didn't go as well, but got a damn load of money out of it. And he had 2 massive boxing matches, right? So he not only is a highly vaunted, highly experienced, highly loved MMA fighter, I think he actually captured a lot of the boxing audience as well. And, for the way he boxed against Tyson Fury, I think he won over a lot of people in terms of, like, this guy, always the excuses, it was the same, not to mention McGregor again, but when he did well against Floyd for 7 rounds, they're like, Floyd was hanging on and made it a fight. Maybe there are bits and pieces about that. Maybe there's bits and pieces about Tyson Fury, not having prepared ultra well and all, but still, he gained that respect. He probably gained a few fans, and people wanted to see the next Joshua bout. They know him. They respect him. They will buy a Francis Ngannou fight. So, with all that said, they have someone now in Francis Ngannou at top of a card that no one outside of the UFC, in my opinion, has ever had, right? Ever. We've had even, and we're going back even to, and maybe a Josh Gross or someone will come on here and correct me, but I think even to the Pride days and everything like that, they had guys, and it was a different landscape then in terms of people watching on TV and all of that, and there was great draws in different countries, maybe in Japan and obviously over in Eastern Europe over the last few years and things like that. But in terms of the American-based sport outside of the UFC, this is special and this is different. And if PFL can harness that, promote it correctly, and make it a success, it could be massive. But it's very tough to do that. As I said, there's a reason it's never happened before, because it's not that simple. Look, even the UFC struggle to do it, and they have, you think they have every advantage, being there for so many years, and the fighters coming through and the most interest and all of that. It's not that easy to do. So to start it off. To start off this episode of the Sheehan Show is why this card is historic in that terms, right? In those terms, should I say, in terms of the ability to have a massive draw at the top of your card and at the top of a great card, which could change things. There's always one moment, in life or in, the life of a business or life of a promotion that could change things. And for some people, for some promotions, now I don't think necessarily the PFL, because they have, they have a lot of investment and different things like that. It can be bad. If this was a promotion that maybe didn't have investment and things like that, it could be a big risk. But I think for the PFL, it's obviously a risk, but I think it's a risk that they can get over if it goes badly. But if it goes well, you're talking about something that could be a real game changer for them in terms of challenging the UFC is not a thing that's going to happen anytime soon, but in terms of gaining something for themselves. I don't know if that's a regular season fandom, but it might be a pay-per-view series fandom that people tune into this pay-per-view and go, oh, that was pretty good. That was as good as the UFC pay-per-view. That didn't cost me maybe as much money. Maybe I'll tune in for that again. And then, maybe in the new year, Francis might fight someone else and do that again and draw again, and people might buy it again. So, big card for that reason. Big card for the future of the chasing pack, and a massive card for the PFL itself. So let's get into it and let's talk about it. And let's start with the main event, Francis Ngannou versus Renan Ferreira. The first thing I need to do is I love looking at our Sherdog pages, looking at the stats, and starting with that, because I think in this fight it's all important. Okay, so here's a few numbers. Francis Ngannou, 38 years of age, just turned 38 in September the 5th, 17-3, 16 finishes in those wins, never been finished, all 3 losses via decision, 1 win via decision. His last fight against Silgan in 2022. January of 2022 as well. So we're 2 months away from January 2025. He's basically been 3 years out of the cage. Before that, it was March of the year before. Before that, it was the May of the year before that, the June of the year before that. The last time he fought twice in a year was 2019. The last time he fought 3 times in a year was 2018. So, Francis, as I said, since 2019, he's fought 3 times. That's 3. We're coming up in 2025 now. That's 3 times in nearly 6 years. Now, he has had the 2 boxing matches in that, but I think that is a big part of it for Francis. Renan Ferreira himself, 13-3, 34 years of age, 6'8" is another thing. What's Francis? Francis is 6'4". So for once, Francis is not the bigger guy in there. Now, February was the last time that Ferreira fought. He fought in November before that, towards the end of last season, and he had 4 fights in 2023. So that's the perfect, I would say the perfect preparation for this. He was very, very busy. Between June and February, he had 4 fights. Between August and February, he had 5 fights. And he's had some time off. He's had, 7? So he fought the end of February, basically 7 months to prepare for this. Know he's going to get a lot of money, knew who he was fighting and all of that. Perfection, really, for Renan Ferreira. So if you're looking at it from Francis' side, it's probably the worst preparation you could possibly have in terms of the sporting aspect of it. And for Renan Ferreira, it's probably the best. You know, the prime of his career, just won the million, just beat Bader and it was only 21 seconds as well. Knew who he was fighting and he came into it. Now, so that's from the sporting side of it. Now, as we know, Francis, you know, it's been a real... And also, I need just to add in from the sporting side of it as well. Obviously, that's MMA we're talking about. Francis has had 2 boxing matches. He was obviously very active with those. The first one went very well. The second one, he got knocked out really, really hard in that one. So to come back from a knockout like that is a major, major thing. And obviously that, you know, that could play a part in this as well. The other side of it, outside of the fights, obviously very, very tragic thing for Francis Ngannou. His one of his kids passed away in the last few months, and you know he's been on that, and he been on was it the Joe Rogan podcast he spoke, but he did an interview and he spoke about it, and he was saying he's kind of coming back to, you know, to honor his child that passed away, and you know, to kind of I don't know, to kind of get his mind off it, to get back to preparation, to get back to work. And you know, it's interesting to see how that works, you know, from in terms of the fight. We have great sympathy, everyone in the MMA community has, for Francis and his family. And for some people, you know, I've heard people speaking about this before, you know, even, you know, we've all faced, I suppose, different tragedies in our life, and for some people, getting back to work is the way to do it. You know, getting back into preparation is your, you know, I don't know, your way of, I don't know the way of mourning, the right way of putting it or not, but you know, you have to get back to normality, you know, to get your sanity back in some sort of way, you know. For some people it's different, you know, for others it's different, but it seems like for Francis, this is the path he has chosen, and whether it's the right one or the wrong one, I suppose we can only find out, but it's a massive part, obviously, of the lead up to this fight, because obviously this is the first fight he's had in the PFL. His life has been insane since 2022 for, you know, the fight with the UFC, but not just the fight with the UFC, the fight with, you know, mixed martial arts, the fight with, you know, it's almost like the Ali Act type of thing. He fought his own fight and he won that fight, and then he had boxing, and then he had the tragedy in his life. It's been a tumultuous time for Francis Ngannou, and now he's coming in, he's fighting Renan Ferreira, and it is, you know, it's you just going through it there. You could write a film about it, right? You could absolutely make a film about this. It's been such, you know, an insane. What about his life before that? You know, we all know about his life before that. Absolutely, Jesus. And look, I suppose if there's anyone as well prepared for that type of tumultuous few years, it's Francis Ngannou. You know, with what he had already experienced in life before that. So it's incredible. It truly is incredible. So for the fight itself, do you know what? This is a fight I've spoken about a lot over the last 7 months, 6 months, 5 months, whatever it might be. And my first thought in it is kind of to carry on from the points I was just making. I really wonder how Francis is going to look. How's he going to enter this fight? How's he going to fight, I suppose, is the latest point I would like to make, or maybe the last point I would like to make in this. But, you know, you go and you box for a couple of years. How's your MMA going to look? You know, I think at the end of Francis's run, he's obviously the Stipe fight, the Gane fight were probably the two best performances the Gane fight maybe not, but in terms of a well-rounded mixed martial artist, yes, I think it will, like he showed in the Stipe fight and the Gane fight. His wrestling had improved defensively in the Stipe fight, offensively in the Gane fight, and before that, you know, the Rosenstruck fight famously is the one where he came out in 20 seconds and just windmilled him, and everyone was like, okay, that's really scary, but does it show, you know, an amazing amount of technical MMA skill, right? And in the next two fights, I think he did show an amazing amount of MMA skill, but that's two fights, you know, 3 and 4 years ago respectively, with 2 boxing matches after that. Again, I'll just put the question out there. What's his MMA game like now? How long has he been training for mixed martial arts in terms of not just preparing for this fight, but in terms of in the middle of all the boxing stuff? Or was it completely boxing? You know, maybe that's a question, you know, to be put to him and to Eric Nixick, and they're the only ones that can answer that. But I'm putting it out here as like, how's this fight going to go? What are the unknowns, I suppose, coming into this? And I think that is, and I'm sure maybe someone asked him, but even if you did ask him, are they going to give you a legitimate answer to that? They'd probably say, he was training away the whole time. But is that true? Who knows? So that's a big thing coming in here. The opposite side, Hina Ferreira, I just read out his record. He's been doing nothing but MMA for, you know, at least for the last 18 months, but, you know, long before that as well. And I think most people, if you looked at Francis Ngannou at his very best, Hina Ferreira at his very best, who you put the two of them in there, who's going to win, the vast majority of people, I think, would pick Francis Ngannou. But is Francis going to be at his very best? Is he going to be as good as we saw him the last time? Like, a lot of people are talking at the moment about Stipe. Right? Oh, the last time he fought, he got knocked out by Francis, and, you know, it was 3 or 4 years ago. Like, Francis has fought once since then, you know, and he fought 5 rounds, but that was a very close fight as well. That could have gone either way, you know, 50-50 type of fight afterwards. So I don't think it's wrong to ask those questions. Now, if Francis comes out and looks absolutely amazing, those questions will be quickly answered, and if he's fighting again, it'll be even more exciting and very, very exciting itself. So that's that part of it. So let's talk about the X's and O's of it, maybe, which probably is the shortest part of the discussion on this fight in some ways. What type of fighter is Hina Ferreira? Let's look at the record here again to start this off. 13 wins, 12 inside the distance, 1 decision. That's the type of fighter he is. That decision was in 2021 against Karl Suantafa. Long time ago, as I said. All his last 5-6 wins in a row, all via finish. Only lost in his career, as I said, Ante Delia. He lost Ante Delia, Brett Martin and LFA back in the day, and 2016 a fight over in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. Before that, Hina Ferreira is a big, tall knockout artist with a lot of quick finishes. His last 4 fights, 21 seconds. 26 seconds of the second round, 4 minutes of the first round, 50 seconds of the first round. He is a knockout artist. He's big and tall, throws big high kicks, front kicks up through the middle, can throw his hands as well, is well able to kind of berserk in the pocket when he needs to. What are his big issues? I suppose his big issues are when he doesn't land that one big shot, can he keep it going for 3 rounds? Will he be able to stick in there with someone like Francis has shown he can go 5 rounds? Or in boxing, what did he go, 10 or 12 rounds in a sport that's that is not his sport. So we know Francis is well able to go that. That's a big issue. And I think as well, we have seen in the past, the Delia fight is I think is the one that stands out, but there's been others thrown in there as well. I suppose his wrestling isn't as, and the Goldsaw fight wasn't in the first round. I didn't get a chance to watch that back, but from memory, the Goldsaw fight was the fight he got taken down, and then 27 seconds into the second round, he knocked his block off. But for the first round, he got taken down and he kind of got dominated. We saw what Francis did in his last fight. He took Cyril Gagné down and dominated him on the ground for periods. Will that be an approach for Francis to take, having been out of mixed martial arts for so long, to kind of prey on him? Or will he be going out there saying, right, I'm a professional boxer now, I just outboxed the greatest heavyweight of all time, let's do it to a mixed martial artist now, is he going to go full Jake Paul on us? But those are questions to be asked. Now, the other side of it, I said earlier, look, if the best Francis fought the best Ferreira, me and everyone else, a lot of people would be picking Francis. So let's say it's not the best Francis. Can Ferreira beat 80% of Francis? Yes, I think he can. The reason he knocked out Bader, Maurice Green, Matthias Scheffel, and many others. He has power, big punches, big kicks, and an ability to land them as well. Plus, he's fought a lot of big guys like that Maurice Green fight, Jamel Jones as well, I believe, a big tall guy. He's used, and someone, not all those guys, okay, Goltsov is a massive Bader especially, but He's used to fighting big guys. He's been in there with big heavyweights for a good long time. Has he fought someone as good as Francis? No, but if this fight happened in the UFC and you had Bader, Goltsov, he fought Rinzan Kuniev as well. That fight was overturned last year. Ante Delia, Fabricio Verdum. That would be a good preparation for fighting Francis Ngannou. So it's not like he is underprepared that way. So that's kind of my breakdown of the fight. If I have to give you a pick, I'll give my pick for the first few fights. I'm very, very interested in seeing the betting lines here. And if the betting lines are wide, they could really have a Renan flyer this week. But I'm going to pick Francis Ngannou. I do think he'll use the wrestling. I could see a bit of early wrestling and middle of the fight, a bit of striking. That's the way I could see this fight going. Or Francis could be very, very well hidden behind his defense on the feet. Stay closer than Ferreira would want in terms of being able to use those kick and that long jab. And even if he does want to use the long jab, stay away from the kick, jab with him and probably beat him there if you're Francis. And, you can bring over to mixed martial arts some of the weapons you used in boxing. So that's the way I see the fight going. I'm very intrigued by it. There's a lot of integers to decide this one, and I can't wait to see it. So Francis Ngannou is the pick. But I don't think Ferreira's out of it. Let's talk about Cris, Cyborg, Justino against Larissa Pacheco. Lucky enough to speak to Larissa during the week, and I didn't realize Larissa's story, to be honest. I had never, I'd watched her fight many times, but I'd never really heard her story. I asked her one of those quotes that when you're interviewing someone, it's very rare to kind of be taken aback in such a way. But I asked her, she's a Brazilian fighter. She's 30 years of age, born in 1994. I asked her, was Cris Cyborg, obviously a female Brazilian fighter, was Cris Cyborg one of your idols? It'd be like, asking a young Irish fighter, was Conor McGregor one of your idols? It'd be like asking a young Canadian fighter, is GSP one of your idols? I just kind of thought she'd say yes. But she was like, no, I didn't have a TV in my house growing up. I didn't even know about MMA. I didn't even know about Cris Cyborg. I was like, whoa, this is a different type of fighter, right? This is a different type of person. And then you think back and you think about her fights and the way she's come through adversity, the way she lost to Kayla Harrison multiple times and didn't get back and beat her. That's why she beat her, because she is, unbeatable. As a person, as a fighter, look, all fighters can be beaten. But as a person, she has shown that she is unbeatable. And, she also said another thing in that interview. Please, I might be slightly not misquoting, but, what's that word? I can't remember that word. But anyway, she basically said, like, I was able to beat Kayla because I wasn't afraid of her. And then I kind of asked her the question, a lot of people get beaten by Cyborg because they're afraid of her. And I was like, is that a benefit to you? And she straight out and said yes. So I actually, like... Don't confuse me with one of those people who talks to someone and then gets convinced they're going to win, but I kind of am like that now. And maybe not convinced she's going to win, but convinced she can win this fight. Because I don't think she's afraid of Cyborg. I think having been in there with Kayla Harrison now multiple times is a big, big thing. Because like a lot of people could argue Kayla Harrison at this stage of her career and Cyborg's career is a better, scarier fighter than Cyborg. You could argue that. Now, I don't know what everyone agree with that, but fair enough, you could argue it. So if you're already in there with Kayla, if you've already beaten Kayla, then, is it that big of a leap to go in there and fight with Cyborg? Very different type of fighters, but no, right? Having said that, I think Larissa's going to have to be perfect to win this fight. Now, another part of it, just to kind of go with the flow of what we were saying earlier on, Cyborg is now 39 years of age, and she turned 39 in July, 27-2. She hasn't fought in almost exactly a year. Only fought once last year, once in 2022, and she fought a couple of times, in 2021, but very inactive again. She did go boxing and everything like that. What's Cris Cyborg going to look like? Again, if Cris Cyborg looks her very best and goes in there and fights Larissa Pacheco, I think she wins, right? And the thing about Cris, I think the difference between Cris and Francis, I'm not sure with Francis, right? I'm not 50-50, but I'm 75% confident in Francis looking like prime Francis. With Cris Cyborg, I'm probably more like 90-95%. I think she'll still come in, or I think she'll still throw her hands. I think she'll still try to land her shots. And for, again, what I was just saying about Larissa, I think she'll have to be perfect. I think she'll have to mix things up, land shots in the feet where she can, mix in a bit of wrestling, even push her against the cage, tire her out, try to draw her in to a fight. Like, you look at Larissa over the last few years, okay, she's had a couple of quick finishes, but her last fight against Marina Spivak went 5 rounds. She went to decision against Julia Budd, went to decision against Kayla Harrison, twice. Went to decision against Sarah Kaufman, and this has just gone back the last kind of 5 years-ish. So she's had a lot of experience, a lot of well able to go, the 3 or 5 rounds. And I think she's going to have to push that pace on Cris Cyborg. Now, Cris has gone there as well. She went to the decision with Blanco. She went to the 5th round with Leslie Smith, 4th round with Julia Budd as well. So there's no doubt that Cris can do it as well. And I'm absolutely not saying that whatsoever. But if Larissa wins it, I think she's going to need to do that. Listen, I think it's going to be very tough. The pick is definitely Cris Cyborg. I think the hands for Cris are going to be too much for anyone who isn't named Amanda Nunes or isn't named Kayla Harrison. And even then, for both of them at this stage in their careers, the Amanda fight could be very different from the first one. And the Kayla fight, she could get, she could get a big shock if that fight was to happen. But for Pacheco, I think it's a tough matchup for her, and I think Cyborg will do enough to get this one. Johnny Eblen versus Fabian Edwards is the next big fight I want to look at. Very, very interesting. They obviously fought once before. I was at the fight here in Ireland, and it was a very, very interesting one. Johnny Eblen ended up getting the finish, but he got his face badly bursted with an elbow. Fabian Edwards had won that first round, much to his chagrin. The fight ended at the start of the 3rd round, so the first 2 rounds were kind of close. I remember, I don't have the cards in front of me now, but Fabian won at least 1, if not 2 rounds, 1 anyway. And I remember I was backstage afterwards, and Johnny Eblen, someone told that to Johnny Eblen that Fabian, was up in a card or drawing on a card or whatever it might be. And Johnny Eblen was shocked. He could not believe it. Absolutely couldn't believe it. And he's like, no, I dominated that fight. And watching it back, he sure didn't. He didn't dominate that fight. So I think I'd be interested to see if that mindset is something that's still there. From what I've heard from him since, I think he still thinks the same way. Didn't perform great against Impa Kasanganai last time out. And I actually don't think Impa performed all that well in that fight either, especially at the start. He kind of came into it. But, this is a big fight for Johnny Eblen, because you're thinking here, right? Johnny Eblen was kind of on the verge of maybe superstardom there not too long ago, especially after the Fabian fight. But, you're fighting a guy you kind of just fought. You fought him in September 2023. Are you going to be as motivated as you are for the first fight, or for a different opponent, or for something else? What's the contract situation? What's going on with Bellator? Obviously, a couple of Bellator shows have been cancelled. You're fighting on a PFL card. What's your next move going to be? I think it's all. There's a lot of stuff going on, I suppose, in the head of Johnny Eblen. For Fabian, I think it's the exact opposite. He said to me, I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. He said, "Look, I know the mistake I made. I was doing well in that fight. It wasn't just the elbow. It wasn't just the big cut. I know what to adjust. I know what to bring into the next fight." And he, I put it to him as well, is the quick kind of turnaround. And it's over a year, but at the same time, it's relatively quick. 1 fight in between it. Is that a benefit for you? And he was categorical in saying that it was. So I'm very interested in seeing this. I think it's a potential pitfall. Could we have a bit of a Michael Bisping, Luke Rockhold sort of situation here as well? It's Fabian is an odd one as well. Like, when Fabian turns up and Fabian fights his fight, there aren't many better middleweights in the world than Fabian Edwards. There's no doubt about that in my mind. But he doesn't always do that. Now, he did it the first time against Johnny Eblen. What's to say he can't do it again? I'm massively looking forward to that fight. If Johnny is well up for that fight and Fabian's well up for that fight, like they were the first time, we could have another absolute banger on our cards here. What I think, right, I think Johnny will have kind of thought of what I said there. And I think what happens when you're thinking there's maybe some potential pitfalls here, I think you revert to type. I think there'll be a lot of wrestling here from Johnny Eblen, a lot of it. I put that to Fabian as well, and he kind of said, look, if he takes me down, I'll get back up and I'll punch him in the face again, type of thing, which is the right mindset to enter it with. But at the same time, you're fighting Johnny Eblen. if Johnny was happy to strike at times in that first fight, I think if he is only happy to wrestle, I think that's probably going to benefit him a lot. And I feel like that's going to be the way forward. But as I said, I wouldn't rule anything out in this fight. I think this is going to, like, it was one of those fights coming into it. I said it was a fight I was attending. I've been a big fan of Fabian for a long time at the time. And maybe even still, I thought Johnny Eblen was the best middleweight in mixed martial arts. I was really looking forward to coming in. But in a way that, like, I'm not sure if this will be a banger type of thing. And it was a banger, right? It really was. And I kind of entered again thinking, maybe it won't be a banger again. But, you know, maybe I have to adjust myself. Sometimes styles make fights. And, you know, positive vibes only. This could be another banger again. I'm really, really looking forward to it. And I'm gonna pick Johnny Eblen, but I'm not at all sure. The last one I'm gonna look at in depth is exactly what I was talking about a second ago, in terms of when I heard about this fight, I was like, oh my god, why are they making that fight? But then you spend 10 seconds thinking about it and you're, shoo, this is amazing. And what is it? It's AJ McKee versus big news Paul Hughes. And if you've been listening to this show, you know a lot about Paul Hughes, 27 years of age, 12-1 out of Derry in Ireland. And, you know, we've been talking about it for a long time. I interviewed Paul before his pro debut, or maybe just after his pro debut. I was at his pro debut against Adam Gustab. It was unbelievable. I've known Paul since a amateur. You know, in the amateurs, he fought. You know, people listen to this. He fought Richie Smollett in the amateurs, who fought in tough. He fought Dylan Tuke, who was in the tough season last year. Fought and Dylan Douglas, another really good amateur at the time, and many, many other guys as well. Fought the best of the best in Ireland as an amateur. And then, you know, came through, fought a lot, obviously, in cage conflict. Broke his 2 hands, I think, wasn't it? He was off for like a year, and then again he got injured, and there was kind of a struggle to get signed for Cage Warriors. He was supposed to be on the Irish Cage Warriors card. They didn't manage to get him there, but then he got on it. Then he got, you know, against Jordan Vucinic. He fought Jordan Vucinic, ended up losing that, a split decision. Became the champion in Cage Warriors, fought Vucinic again, beat him, made absolute mincemeat out of him. Beat Marcus Charrier in there as well, and then it was like, he's going to sign for the UFC, and it didn't happen. I spoke to him in the middle of it. He had almost signed, and then there was an injury, and he'd almost signed. There was a visa issue, and you know, he fought J.K. Higgins, and he fought Fabian Silva, and then the decision was made to sign for the PFL. You know, sign a big money contract apparently, and with the thought that he's going to enter the 2025 season. And what happens? They're like, okay, the talk is that we're going to have a warm-up fight here against Bobby King. It was a tough enough fight. Bobby King's a good fighter, but he gets the win, gets the finish, and then it's announced that he's going to fight AJ McKee in a fight that no one had thought of before. But mightn't be the right fight, mightn't be the right timing, but God Almighty, what a fight it is! You know, AJ McKee, one of the best fighters in the world over the last few years. It feels like he's been in a bit of a waiting pattern, though, for a while. Like his last 4 fights, Clay Collard, Sidney Outlaw, Roberto de Souza, Spike Carlisle, since 2022, since those back-to-back Patricio fights, he should have been fighting better fighters than them. With all due respect to all those guys, I have a lot of respect for all of them. You know, but this is a weird fight. We don't see fights like this in mixed martial arts. We don't see it. It's the best up-and-coming guy, the best free agent, young signee you can get against basically like your number one contender, maybe your number one guy. This is like, you know, do you know when people say, all right, Bo Nickel, great fighter, let's have him fight Adesanya. Let's do that, right? How many people have said it? I've probably said it in this show. How many people have said it? Let's go all the way to the top with him, see where he lands. This is what that is. That is this fight. I've said that, these, those. But God Almighty, I don't know if I agree with this matchmaking. I don't know, but I've said it many times before, and I'll say it again. If you give me a great fight, I won't complain about it too much, and I won't complain about this too much. But I had to explain the thought process that I have behind it when I heard about this fight. But at the same time, look, I think these two guys could end up in an absolute insane fight altogether, because do you know what these two guys are? I think especially Hughes, but somewhat McKee as well, because McKee obviously has been fighting to a very, very high level. Fought Patricio twice, fought Darian Caldwell, Georgie Canyon, Pat Curran, Daniel Crawford, Brian Moore, who put up a great fight against him, Justin Lawrence, and many more. Whereas Hughes has been in, the best guys he's been in again are Vucinic and Chariot. Now, I think Vucinic is probably as underrated and as good as most of those, apart from maybe Patricio. So he's fought good guys too. But we have seen AJ tested at a very high level. We've yet to see Paul tested at a very high level. But what we've seen for both of those guys is very high level ability. It has translated for AJ, apart from maybe the second Patricio fight which you get in a second. Will it translate for Paul? Right? And if it does, this could be bonkers amongst bonkers. It really could be. It could be one of the most high level fights ever. Right? Now, will it translate? Will it ever translate? One question. Will it translate on Saturday night? Another question. Will it translate during next season? Is another question. All of those could be yes. All of those could be no. Right? But the one thing is, if Paul Hughes had signed for the UFC, he'd have 10 fights before he'd get a fight like this. And now he's been put straight into it. And that is insane, right? So let's look at some of the key parts of the fight. I think AJ McKee is one of the most underrated grapplers in mixed martial arts. Over at Severe May, I run the awards there, and a lot of people voting it. He won our submission of the year twice in a row. I think he won it once in Sherdog, but he's won it 2 years in many different places. Had great submissions 2 years in a row. And I don't know if you went up to someone who's an MMA fan and said to them, "Oh, AJ McKee, great submission artist," would they necessarily say, "Oh, he is," or ask them what he is? Would anyone say great submission artist? I'd say, not a lot of people actually would say that, but he's 8 submission wins and some very, very good ones in there. Paul Hughes is a guy, right? A lot of his fights do end up on the feet and are fall out there, but he has 3 submission wins. And there was a few of his fights. I think the Aiden Stephen fight is his last submission, but it's one that sticks out as well, where I think people kind of coming into that, if I remember correctly now, we're kind of saying, he can fight on the feet and he can, he won by a head kick before that, but can he do it on the ground? And then he goes in, he takes a lad down and beats him on the ground. I think he did a bit of that against James Hinden as well, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to go back and watch that fight again, but there was definitely a couple of fights where Paul showed a lot of his ground game and how good he is on the ground, and he's well able to fight on the ground. If that goes to the ground, bonkers. Right? For AJ McKee and Paul Hughes, they're very different fighters on the feet. AJ has shown at times he fights a bit like Paul. So Paul on the feet, fast, technical, is always trying to do something, always trying to land his shots, always trying to push the pace. AJ has done that a few times, notably against Spike Carlisle. But that fight happened directly after the Patricio fight. A lot of times when he does it, he gets on top of his work and he maybe gets taken down. He ends up getting submissions, which is all well and good, but that does tend to happen at times. He looked fantastic against Patricio the second time, obviously, the one that he lost, but he lost it because he just didn't do enough. It was very, very close. If that technical fighter comes in there and fights Paul Hughes, we're going to have a real mesh of styles there that are very, very different. And who's going to win that? Very hard to know. Really, really, really hard to know. I'm just thinking here I have to make a pick for this fight, and I don't want to. I really don't want to. Can I pick the draw? I'm picking the draw. I don't care. I'm refusing to make a pick. I can't wait for this fight. I really, really can't. I'll tell you what, if Paul Hughes gets in there and gets going early and gets his hands going, I think he could cause AJ McKee fits. I really do. I think if AJ takes control of the fight and Paul is struggling to land, I think that's where the guy who's less experienced at this level may struggle a little bit. When the guy who's been in there with some of the best in the world is dominating the fights technically, that's where a turn is very hard to make. The fight on the ground, very interesting to see who wins that. Like, can AJ land something? Like, if Paul gets on top, he's vicious on top as well. Paul as well, when he gets kind of the fight to the cage, throws these big shots. Very, very good there. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be very, very close. And as I said, I'm going with the draw. I'm going with the draw here. So those are the big fights in this card. But there's some other fights as well, just to quickly run through them here. Rafian Stotts against Marcos Moreno. Big fight for Rafi and Stats here. He's 12-2. Lost a couple of fights ago to Pacheco. Obviously, he's beaten Danny Sabatello, but that was around this time last year as well, over in Bellator 301. And, it's a big time, I think, for him. It's a real big time for him, having just lost the title. Obviously, Pacheco was supposed to fight coming up here pretty soon. Hopefully, he'll be fighting rescheduled not too long away. And I think if he wins this, he should be right back in there in terms of number one contender. Bruno lost last time out to Danny Sabatello as well after winning 3 fights in a row. Before that, obviously his second fight over in Bellator 1-1 there now. So I think it's a big fight for him. Obviously, he's a lot of finishes as well, 15 fights and 13 finishes. Watching bits and pieces of him. Look, I think what he has to do is do what Pacheco Mix did at times to Stats and try to beat him to the punch and try to land that big shot in him. But does he have that power, the Pacheco Mix power, or the ability that Pacheco Mix has? I'm not too sure. I think I'll probably go with the wrestling of Stats to take that one. Derek Sanders is fighting Mega Shapir Zanugov. Easy for me to say. Sanders been around for a while, 9-4 now, 34 years of age. Came into the PFL in his last fight after he fought a lot of the. He's fought a lot of guys who you'd know, Terrence McKinney, Jonathan Pierre, Zach Zane, getting an opportunity here. His opponent has won his last 4 in a row, a lot of finishes, fighting out of Russia as well. You think maybe he'll be entering a tournament next year, and maybe that's kind of a setup for Makan Sharip there in that one. One fight I'm really excited about is Ibrahimov. He's fighting against Nacho Campos, both undefeated 7-0 versus 5-0. Ibrahim is a really good athlete. He's fighting out of the UK. His 2 brothers are actually playing for Manchester United, the soccer team. And as I said, 7-0. He was supposed to fight not too long ago, but that fight didn't happen. He fought in the PFL and beat Josh Reed in 50 seconds, who is if anyone's watched Cage Warriors, we know how good Josh Reed is. As I said, this is a guy who could be an absolute star. Imagine if you're a guy fighting for a championship or something like that and his brother's playing for Man United. That's absolutely huge. And then Campos fighting out of Spain. This is a big step up for him. It's his first time in one of a major organization, but he's fought in that AFL organization, which I believe is out of Spain, if I'm not mistaken. And he's won a few fights there. I haven't seen too much of him, but he's big power in his hands from what I did see. So you could see a lot of wrestling here from the mauler Ibrahimov in this one. I think he will get through that. And there's a couple of fights in to start it off. Mustafa Rashid Nada against Ahmed Sami, 9-3 versus 11-4. Ahmed Sami's been around for a long while now, fighting out of Egypt, but he's fought in Octagon and UAE Warriors and Brave and other places. He fought a couple of times and beat Omar El Dafari, who is in the PFL MENA. At this time, he fought Tom Breeze back in 2022 as well. Ended up losing that fight, but he's been a guy who's around since 2013. Hadn't all that many fights, but has come back and has been active over the last while. Kind of good power in his hands as well. 30 years of age now. It's a big time for him, and I suppose kind of fighting out, his opponent's fighting out of Saudi Arabia. He's 9-3. He's been in PFL MENA as well. Won his fight there against Abdel Darai. Another guy again who I think for the local audience you might see in PFL MENA next year. Not a bad fighter at all, and big power as well in his hands with 6 knockouts in his 9 wins there. And then opening the card, Yusuf Al Husani against Ta Bin Daoud, both very very young in their careers. 3-0 for Bin Daoud, and Al Husani is 4-1. Obviously, he's fighting out the United Arab Emirates as well. This is his first fight here, but he's fought 3 times in UAE Warriors. Fought over in Centurion as well, and in Tahaz fighting out of Canada. He's 3-0, and he fought in UAE Warriors a couple of times as well. So interesting to see how that goes for him there. No knockouts by him yet, but he has a submission thrown in there as well. So very interesting card this weekend. I went 15 minutes over my 30 minutes time, but look, it's okay. I know people like the longer podcast anyway, so we'll leave it at that. I'll have the betting show out later in the week. Please tune into that. And for now, we will leave it there. Thank you very much. Tell a friend about this podcast. Tell a friend about the card coming up this weekend, and tell them here's where you get the best analysis on it from me, Sean Sheehan, on Sherdog.com. Good luck. We'll see you all next time. Bye now.